Who hasn't heard of Grand Theft Auto 5? It is only the second best-selling video game of all time, and despite being over 10 years old, it is not uncommon to still see the game fairly high on the list of current player bases. Now, GTA Online probably has something to do with that, but the single-player portion was still very well received. If you were to tell me that GTA 5 was your all-time favorite video game, I would completely understand. There is a ton of effort put into this game, the world is immaculately detailed, and the 3 playable characters have become icons in their own right. However, if you were to tell me that GTA 5 is one of the best open world games of all time, well, I would disagree, and that's the reason for this video's existence. Grand Theft Auto 5 is definitely an enjoyable game, on a first playthrough. About halfway into my second playthrough, I realized that I was playing the game the exact same way as before, and any attempts to deviate from that were met with a mission failed screen. Outside of missions, the various activities are either redundant or poorly implemented, to the point where they feel like a waste of time. For an open world game that the Grand Theft Auto series is a poster boy for, that is not a good sign. With Grand Theft Auto 6 on its way, I thought it would be a good time to discuss GTA 5 specifically as an open world game, and explain why the game is severely lacking in this regard. I am going to be doing that by covering its mechanics, missions, and the various activities the player can partake in. First of all, when you think of Grand Theft Auto, what are the main things that come to mind? Probably the open world, shootouts, police chases, and the namesake carjacking. The last 3 do not need clarification, but I think I need to define what I consider to be an open world game, so that we're on the same page as we go forward. People tend to give the term different definitions, but when I think of it, 3 things come to mind: player agency, creativity, and replayability. These words essentially mean that the player can approach their objectives however they wish, within the confines of the game of course. Certain limitations are obviously going to be necessary. Gaming hasn't yet reached the point where we can kill every target in Assassin's Creed by poisoning their food with laxatives, locking the door to the nearest bathroom, and watching them explode from the intestinal pressure. We are confined by what the developers enable us to do. A good open world mission is going to give you an objective and a variety of ways to achieve that. A bad open world mission is only going to offer one. To me, these kinds of games carry an expectation to be more replayable. If the game is going to hold your hand to the point where you can't even deviate 5 meters from the established path, then you might not as well even play an open world game. And that is my biggest issue with Grand Theft Auto 5. Many of the missions are extremely linear for practically no reason, and as a result, the game commits one of the biggest sins an open world game can commit. It lacks replayability. You played through it once, and you've already experienced just about everything the game had to offer. And what is perhaps the most tragic about this is that it could have been prevented relatively easily. Many of the missions feature excessive failure conditions, and there are mechanics that are used only for a few moments and then discarded for the rest of the game. Mechanics that could have been available as options the player could use in the sandbox. I am not going to discuss the story, but rather focus on the gameplay. This is a video game. If I wanted a good story, I'd read a book or watch a movie, though given how linear Grand Theft Auto 5 is at times, calling it a movie isn't that far off. After the prologue that introduces you to the shooting and the ability to swap characters, we get a set of fairly linear missions that mainly serve as tutorials. I'm not going to be covering these, as a linear nature makes sense for tutorial missions, and they're a staple, not just in GTA, but other similar games. But even the missions that do serve as tutorials don't always teach the player something they get to use often. Take the mission where Franklin sneaks into Michael's house to steal his SUV, which teaches the new stealth mechanics. By pressing the left stick, your character will go into a slight hunch and move slowly but quietly. This lets you sneak up on enemies and knock them out, though the amount of times you get to use this feature throughout the game could probably be counted on one hand. In most of the Assassin's Creed games, for instance, you'll go through a tutorial for the game's stealth mechanics, and then you get to use them throughout the game. The missions, and even many of the side activities, are built so that you could take advantage of stealth. You might be asked to assassinate someone. The enemies will usually not be aware of you, making a stealthy approach possible. Not so much in Grand Theft Auto 5. Enemies will either already be aware of you, or the areas are just designed in a way that do not support such a playstyle. I understand that the GTA games have never been focused on stealth, but they devoted an entire button input to this new mechanic, previously used for crouching, and barely gave us any opportunities to use it. The Franklin missions are fairly standard for the series. You steal cars and occasionally get into shootouts, unlike the Michael missions that mainly revolve around family drama and feature only a token amount of violence and carjacking. That's not to say that every mission needs to end with a shootout or a car chase, but stuff like this simply lacks replay value, as it fails to make use of the game's signature mechanics, like, Grand Theft Auto. Eventually though, Michael destroys the house of a mob boss, and quickly needs to make enough money to pay for the repairs. After a thrilling mission that involves shopping for clothes, slowly walking through an office building, and using antivirus software, we finally reach heists, one of the new mission types. These are larger, multi-step missions that require extensive preparation, and our first hit is going to be a jewelry store. Gathering information for the heist is around 10 minutes of walking and driving, something that would have been better served as a cutscene or something done off screen. This is a theme with just about all the missions where you gather information on heists, and the worst is yet to come, and while they might be exciting for the first playthrough, they really get old fast on subsequent ones. Once you've finished the walking simulator, you will begin planning the job. This is one of the new features that actually offers replay value and depth, but it's severely underutilized. Most heists have two ways to approach them. In this instance, robbing the store in daytime versus knocking everyone out with pesticides. The heists themselves are very linear, however your choices on who to bring with you can not only change the payout, but even the way the mission is going to play out. A more expensive crewman will demand a higher cut, but their performance is going to match that, while a cheaper goon can create unnecessary complications and even cause you to lose out on potential payouts. Each member of the crew will gain more experience as they complete heists, so sticking with an unskilled but cheaper goon can pay off big time. For this heist, I chose the smart option and picked the most efficient crew possible. Packy, who you can find in a random encounter that took like 15 minutes for me to activate. He has very high stats, but demands a slightly lower cut than his equivalent. Ricky, a crappy hacker that only takes 5% of the cut, and Karim, a mid-level driver. This will ensure the highest reward for the heist, and make Ricky and Karim gain more experience, while their pluck-ups for this mission are tolerable. Before the deed is done, however, we will have to obtain the necessary equipment, the gas, and an exterminator van. The gas is transported by truck on a highway, and you can either shoot the doors off of it and take the dropped gas, or steal the truck entirely. For the van, you can either walk up to it and steal it, forcing you to deal with the police, or actually make use of the stealth mechanics for once to knock one of the workers out, and take the van without anyone else being the wiser. I am not even exaggerating here when I say that these two short missions have more replay value than like 50% of the main story missions, as they give the player agency in how they approach the objectives. When the heist is finally done, we switch perspectives and meet Trevor. He spontaneously decides to eliminate all of the bikers in the area, and to achieve that, you are forced to chase this van around the lake. Despite being driven by bikers, and the characters even stating that they know where it is going, you cannot destroy it or kill the driver before it reaches the location that the game needs it to. Could have been a fun little reward for the players who master the drive-by mechanics and kill the guy in the van, meaning that there'll be less bikers to deal with in the final destination. Coincidentally, one of the missions in Grand Theft Auto 4 did just that, where you had to kill a biker who also took off as soon as he saw you. Eventually, he regrouped with some friends and stopped, forcing you to kill them all, but if your aim was good, you could waste him before that happened. This isn't a concept foreign to the series, and I really don't know why it couldn't have been used here. Yes, here it is hand-waved as the characters just wanting to be sure, but it's still another limitation on the player. After that, it is time to take over an airstrip. I sure hope we get to make use of the sandbox. No. You're forced to use a sniper rifle for the first half of the mission to kill the targets before they spot your friends sneaking in. Trevor Phillips, the meth head who is introduced banging a hooker, bashing the brain out of the lost and damned protagonist, and deciding to wipe out every biker in the county on a whim, He's forced to sit hundreds of meters away from the action and use a silent sniper rifle. I understand that he is supposed to cover Ran as he plants explosives on the fuel tanks, but why can't you do it yourself? Either by using the game's stealth mechanics that you were taught in the beginning to sneak close, or fully embrace the psychotic side of Trevor and just perforate the damn things with gunfire, or the grenade launcher that you unlocked in the previous Metal Lab mission. You're here to steal the planes and blow up the gas tanks. There is no reason to limit the player to using a silent sniper rifle, and only killing the marked targets if the plan involves them becoming aware of the player anyway. There's also a mission where you wipe out a family of hillbillies, and this does offer some room for creativity. They're not aware at first, and you can kill a good amount of them with your suppressed sniper rifle, before they have a chance to alert their friends. Possibly even all of them, but I haven't pulled it off myself. The mission where you return to the biker trailer park to finish them off once and for all also offers some of the few moments in the game where sneaking can be used, and it's possible to complete the segment without being detected. Shockingly, there is also no penalty for going in loud, so well done. Trevor then meets up with Michael, who eventually wakes up in a morgue and has to shoot his way out. This would have been the perfect mission to use the stealth mechanics in. There is lots of cover and several hallways that could have been used to evade enemy patrols, but other than knocking out the first guy to get his gun, you can't be stealthy. Enemies are immediately aware that you are up and about. After escaping the building, you have to shake off the cops, but imagine if this could have been avoided if you were stealthy, by using the very same mechanics that Michael's introductory mission taught us. The 2-minute Boxstar van mission pulled this off, but this one doesn't. Trevor moves to Los Santos and wants to steal something expensive, and the preparation for this particular heist is one of the worst missions I have ever played in an open world game, scouting out the port. This mission consists of nothing but driving, walking, and occasionally operating heavy machinery to perform menial labor. Without skipping cutscenes or speedrunning, it will take you at least half an hour, and it is so bad that to earn the gold medal, you have to complete it in under 20 minutes. I am willing to suffer through boring bits when replaying games, but this is just a little too much. When I play Grand Theft Auto, role-playing as a dock worker isn't something I'm looking for. There are two ways to go about the heist: steal the item from the docks, or take the one that has been deployed in the sea. I take the first option, which only requires you to steal a submarine, while the other option requires not only that, but also a military cargo helicopter from the military base that is suspiciously empty for that setup mission only. The submarine can be taken in two ways: lowering it from the lightly guarded ship, or shooting out the wires holding it. For the heist itself, Michael sneaks onto the boat and plants bombs all around the ship, while Franklin covers him with a sniper rifle. There is the option for stealth here, and it's actually possible to maintain it up until the bombs detonate. I do have some issues though. Why is Franklin the one using the sniper rifle when Michael is the one character with the ability to slow time for a perfect shot? Or why does his rifle have a thermal scope that can only be used for like 2 missions and nowhere else in the game? Or why my game glitched out and didn't let me use the zoom feature on the sniper rifle, making hitting long range enemies near impossible? The Xbox One version of the game is actually glitchier than the one I played on the 360, while still having similar atrocious loading times. Glad to see the more powerful hardware being put to good use. Successfully completing the heist will reward you with literally nothing, as the molester shows up and orders the thing to be put back where it was, making the entire affair a waste of time. The game not really respecting the player's time and efforts is something of a theme with Grand Theft Auto 5. We already saw that with Skyrim on the port, and it permeates so many aspects of the game, not just the main story. At some point, our gang gets tangled up with the FIB, and they are forced to rescue Mr. K from the IAA building. Trevor uses a helicopter, Michael rappels down the building, while Franklin supports with sniper fire. There isn't much room for creativity, but this mission can be played out a little differently each time, as you can swap between all 3 characters at certain points, who all have their different roles to play. This is something fairly unique to Grand Theft Auto 5, and makes it stand out from the other open world games, but as with the heists, it just isn't utilized all that often. The next mission is the infamous torture mission that was going to turn the next generation into psychopaths, and while I would criticize it for not letting us use the waterboarding mechanics in the sandbox, I will instead offer praise. You can actually shoot the targeted Azerbaijani if you know who he is beforehand, without getting all the information out of Ferdinand, skipping most of the torture. Given how happy the game generally is to punish the player for this kind of stuff, it's a little surprising, and even the in-game dialogue reflects that.
What the hell?
That was the guy. I had a feeling. It'll check out.
Well, we've got him. It's done.
For the next FIB mission, you will need to rob an armored truck. To do that, you will need to get a tow truck, a garbage truck, and a getaway vehicle. The last part can be very tricky, as you can leave a getaway car almost anywhere on the map, so long as the game considers the area secluded. For some bizarre reason, the game never tells you the approximate area where the heist takes place, so it is entirely possible to screw yourself by parking the getaway vehicle several kilometers away from the site, as I did on my first playthrough. I really do appreciate the fact that the game doesn't really hold your hand in this regard, but is it really necessary to allow the player to leave the getaway car in, say, Paleto Bay, on the other side of the state? It is an extreme example, yes, but it is still baffling that there is no indication on where you're supposed to be escaping from in the first place, and those under Virgin playthrough will most likely make the mission more difficult. The heist itself can be planned with different crewmates or approaches, but you can swap between all three characters at once. It's what we'd expect from a GTA game, so maybe it balances out the mission where Michael does yoga. Yes, that is actually in the game, and it's mandatory. You have to do 3 rounds to proceed, and if you fail one, you have to do the entire round again. Remember when I said that the game doesn't respect the player's time? This is one of the examples. Any other GTA game, hell, most open world games, would have this as a cutscene, but not GTA 5. Michael later meets his idol film producer and is tasked with talking sense into an actor. To do this, you have to sneak onto a rooftop. This is an opportunity to use stealth, but it's the bad kind. The one where you fail the mission if you get detected, though there is a brief period where you can kill the enemies before they raise the alarm. I have been complaining about not being able to use stealth, but forced stealth missions are not the way to go. Mandatory stealth doesn't encourage experimentation or replays, as it railroads you into a specific playstyle. This isn't even a criticism for GTA 5 specifically, but any sandbox game with stealth mechanics. Even the Assassin's Creed games I used as examples before suffer from this. You finally reach the roof and have to intimidate Rocco by beating him up. The game will not go forward when you're aiming a gun at him despite him raising his hands, clearly scared. Shooting him in the foot, something that was actually done in GTA 4 for the purpose of intimidation, will fail the mission. I don't mind the fact that I have to beat him up. I do mind the fact that it is the only option available to me. By now you have also opened up the Devin Weston arc, where the gang is tasked with obtaining rare vehicles for him, the first of which takes you on a literal trek around the map. The next rare car requires the use of a helicopter-mounted police scanner to track the owner to the vehicle, a feature that is used for this mission and this mission only. That reminds me of the police computer from Grand Theft Auto 4 that was used for 1 or 2 story missions. Unlike the police scanner though, the computer had additional uses, as through them you could do vigilante missions, tackle the most wanted criminal lists, or call for police reinforcements, sometimes even eliminating your targets for you. It wasn't just a one-off thing that was immediately discarded after its introduction. Through it, you could access additional content or even formulate new strategies. The police scanner has no such use, though given how its mission is essentially an 8-minute long interactive cutscene, perhaps it is for the best. Shit, Franklin gets to chase and steal a unique vehicle while the player is stuck with the psychotic Trevor staring at the computer screen. The third car is used as an expensive prop and has been modified with spy movie gadgets, so Franklin has to break into a film studio. Here, the game gives you 2 options, either brute force your way to the car, alerting security, or disguising yourself as an actor, getting closer to the car, and still alerting security who see through the disguise. Why even give a seemingly alternate solution when the mission is going to play out the same way anyway? As far as I know, there is no way to avoid getting detected. Now, the vehicle itself is unique, in that it can deploy spies to disable pursuing vehicles, but as you'd guess, it is limited to this and one other mission later on. Given the introduction of vehicle modding, this wouldn't be an obvious mod to improve your vehicle of choice. I recently replayed Far Cry 6, and it also has its fair share of vehicles that are introduced in specific missions for specific scenarios, but here's the thing, you unlock them for use in the sandbox afterwards. There's an airplane modified to fire napalm bombs that is used to burn down fields, but you can call upon it at a vehicle pickup point afterwards and use it for whatever you feel like it, being story missions, outposts, or whatever else. Same thing with a unique tank that has its machine gun replaced by a flamethrower. I understand that it is somewhat unfair to compare a game from 2013 to one released less than 3 years ago, but the mechanics themselves are already in the game. They just needed to be removed from the confines of the mission they were introduced for, and the sandbox experience would have been improved. Imagine if the player could use this jack-up spy vehicle for other missions, or at the very least, unlock the spy deployer as a customization option. Continuing with the theme of features being introduced, just to be discarded afterwards, Trevor and Michael need to silence a witness for the Mexican Tony Montana, whose house Michael tore down. The target is in an airplane, and to bring it down, you are given a remote-controlled heavy sniper turret. Again, exclusive to this mission, hell, the game even has you destroy the van it is in to further rub salt into the wound. Possibly as vengeance for preventing us from obtaining this interesting tool, Trevor robs the Mexican's wife and gets himself exiled from Los Santos along with Michael. To keep himself busy, Trevor plans to steal a cargo jet from midair, though the description for that is far more interesting than most of the mission, as you'll instead fly a crop duster that is slower than a pensioner getting off public transport for 75% of the mission. This is another mission that promises great rewards, but only ends in disappointment, as the cargo plane is scripted to get shot down. You can actually find the wreckage afterwards, and it does spawn some weapons around it, but it's stuff you are pretty much guaranteed to have. At some point, the surviving hillbillies want revenge on Trevor, and it's time to get rid of this threat. You can't kill them all for half the mission though, as the car and its occupants are completely invincible while you're chasing them with Franklin, so his synergetic use of slow time and drive-bys can be put to use. They are scripted to crash though, and you get to use the thermal scope rifle for the second time to locate them. Your FIB friends need more money, and it's time to rob the Paleto Bay Bank. As you probably expected, there is an overly long sequence where you scope the place out, a short but somewhat fun preparation mission that allows for some creativity, then the heist itself. This one doesn't have two options, and you'll only have to pick one gunman. The team does a Michelin Man cosplay, which reduces movement but increases damage resistance. Again, something that is only used for this mission. It is fun though, especially since you get to unlock the minigun from this point on, but as seems to be a theme, the payout is going to be much lower than the tantalizing $8 million you see at the bottom right might indicate. Perhaps to make up for that, Trevor and Michael rob a train, which involves Mr. Phillips getting to the top of it using a dirt bike. Are you kidding me? Did the mission really fail because they only have this one cutscene that features the bike? The train eventually crashes, and Trevor has to cover Michael as he's searching for something valuable. You get to use the thermoscope sniper rifle for the third and final time. You will always live on, in my heart. After some time, Michael robs a shady factory that requires cutting through an undercover crate. And yes, you have to cut through every single bar. For the plot, you are sneaking into the facility, but other than the two cars you can let pass by, you don't technically use the actual stealth mechanics. The mission is just heavily scripted to create the illusion of stealth. None of it is due to the player's own agency or skill. Once you reach the goal, an alarm is tripped, and you are forced to shoot your way out. As I suggested with the morgue mission, imagine if this shootout could have been avoided with the effective use of stealth mechanics. This is also perhaps the only time the player gets any use out of the stun gun. You can use it outside of missions, but the thing really has no purpose in the sandbox. Trevor realized what happened at the prologue and gets Michael captured. Franklin has to rescue him, and the meat processing plant where he is held is sadly set up in a way where stealth isn't possible. You'd think that maintaining a low profile for a rescue mission would be important, but apparently not. There's also a really strange optional objective here that requires you not to use a map waypoint while searching for Michael, when you have no reason to use one in the first place, as you rely on a radar-like phone app. Some of the optional objectives in general feel really half-assed. To get most of the time limit ones, skipping cutscenes and bull rushing through everything is practically mandatory, which clashes with the cinematic presentation the game is going for. Others are awarded for completing tasks that are already mandatory, which begs the question why they are even considered optional. The time has come to finally deliver the cars to the rich prick. There is a long ass road trip with a slow truck, and at the end, the police get involved. Franklin hops onto the film studio car that now has machine guns mounted on it, that you can use for a whole 2 minutes to disable a few police cars. Remember what I said about the spike strips being available as a customization option? Take a wild guess as to what I think about these MGs. Then comes the second worst mission in the game, the FIB building setup, where you stare at license plates and tail a slow moving vehicle for almost 7 minutes straight. For the heist itself, I went with the loud approach that involves parachuting through the roof. With the cheap Ricky having gained experience from the jewelry store heist, he will be a bit more competent, guiding us as we hack through the FIB database, which looks a lot like those crappy mobile game ads that YouTube loves to throw our way. The gunman is the cheapest one, as he isn't scripted to die. It might be an oversight, but I'll take every advantage I can get. There is a mission that I like, that involves a giant shootout at the court, and you can swap between Trevor and Michael, who are at different positions, with their own advantages and disadvantages. I already briefly mentioned this, but characters have special abilities. Franklin can slow time in a vehicle to make sharper turns or more accurate drive-bys. Michael can slow time on foot to line up a perfect shot, while Trevor essentially becomes invincible and deals more damage. The missions are not always designed with those abilities in mind though, and this is one of them. Trevor is in a sniping spot, relatively safe, while Michael is stuck on the ground, under fire from multiple directions. When you consider the special abilities, the position should have been reversed to play to the character's strengths. Yes, it's a minor thing, but it really does feel like more could have been done here. After the shootout, Franklin's idiot friend Lamar gets kidnapped and it is up to us to save him. The start offers 3 different avenues that Trevor and Franklin can sneak up to, while Michael supports from a longer range. There's a direct route, a lightly guarded path, and one that offers an excavator. You can have all 3 characters play to their strengths, and then swap between them on the fly. This is the sort of mission design that should have been used instead of the more linear ones, as it still would have made the game stand out, while increasing replay value. Considering the length and depth of the mission, it also has a surprisingly low amount of failure conditions, making it one of my favorites. Seriously, take a look at the failure condition lists on GTA 5's missions and compare it to the previous games. It's almost comically excessive. The time has come for the big boy heist, and I chose the loud option that involves drilling through to the vault door while security is kept occupied. The preparation mission for this one involves stealing a giant drill, and after 15 minutes of trying, I was able to get it without alerting anyone and getting a guaranteed wanted level. The heist itself involves large shootouts, which is to be expected. After a series of intensive firefights, you have to make your way to an escape vehicle and flee the scene. It pays to have the vehicle upgraded beforehand. Mida vittu? Oh, thank God. I thought I was going to have an aneurysm here. You switch to Franklin and are presented with 3 choices: kill Michael, kill Trevor, or the so-called death wish ending. I chose the last one, as the other ones are relatively short and simplistic, and here, the 3 protagonists decide to finally get rid of the people who want them dead or have screwed them over. The first step is to lure their security forces to a foundry and have them kill each other off. As was the case with rescuing Lamar, each character can fill a different role here, and you can switch between them as the mission goes on. The three MCs will then assassinate one of the douchebags that they've met during the story, and there aren't any severe limits on how it could be done, which I do appreciate, but it's a damn shame how the best missions in the game, at least when it comes to replayability, are shoved towards the end. And that's pretty much the story of Grand Theft Auto 5. There are missions that I skipped here and there, mainly because they were so short that there wasn't much to discuss, but overall, these are the aspects of the main story I wanted to cover, specifically when it comes to replayability and the sandbox elements. So, what are the biggest issues in Grand Theft Auto 5? Features and mechanics are introduced, but then discarded without giving the player a chance to use them in the sandbox or in other missions. The missions themselves go for a very cinematic experience, but their heavily scripted nature comes at the expense of player agency. The features unique to Grand Theft Auto 5, like the plannable heists or switching characters, aren't really utilized enough to make it stand out. Quite a bit of effort was put into the stealth mechanics, but there are barely any scenarios to utilize them, which is a shame as stealth had the potential to be a major addition to the sandbox. In the end, we are simply left with a very linear experience that doesn't really justify its open world sandbox setting. You play through the story once, and other than the alternate heists, you've experienced just about everything the game has to offer. But Uncle Lesser, I hear you say, there's side content too. That's true, but the other activities in the game have their own issues. I wanted to cover the side missions too, also referred to as strangers and freaks, but they're so basic that they're really not worth covering individually. In fact, they might even be worse than most of the story missions, as a lot of them just involve driving or very basic objectives that only have one way to complete. None of them even attempt to spice up the gameplay in any way, as at least some of the story missions did. Though the Epsilon program missions for Michael are worth singling out, for one simple reason: they suck ass. It starts out fairly innocently enough. You donate money and steal a few vehicles while you delve into an obvious Scientology-like scam. There are 5 luxury vehicles that the cult wants you to steal. You can either randomly find them in traffic or at specific points where they spawn, for this mission only. And no, the game doesn't even hint at these spawns, forcing you to either waste time in traffic, hoping for a blessing from RNGesus, or look up a guide online. Then comes the mission where you have to wear a single outfit for 10 days straight. It doesn't seem too bad, until you realize that changing characters carries the risk of Michael having swapped his clothes back, restarting the counter. The game says that you have to wear the outfit for 10 cumulative days, but as is the case with anything published by the Russian government, that is a lie. It really is 10 days straight. Even the GTA wiki will outright state that it is best to just sleep for 10 days, or commit suicide 20 times to make time go faster. It's like the game doesn't want to be played. This is followed by a mission that requires you to travel 5 miles on foot in the desert. No käib putsi. You couldn't tell me this before I arrived here. Ignore the immaculately detailed urban areas in favor of a mostly featureless environment. And God help you if you accidentally pass the vague area the game wants you to stay in, as you reset the entire thing if you cross these esoteric boundaries. Since the game obviously doesn't respect my time here, I decided to drop the Epsilon arc here and there, and didn't get footage for the final trial, but I did complete it on my 360, so I can tell you what you receive for undertaking this almost biblical effort. A rusty tractor, of course. Or $2 million if you betray the Epsilonists, but that really isn't worth the shit you have to put up with first. Sure, there is the potential for a solid reward, but what happened to earning it through activities that are actually fun and engaging? This isn't an alien concept to the series. Strangers and freaks aren't the only scripted scenarios one can find in Greater San Andreas. There are also random events, which are much shorter and simpler. These can range from delivering NPCs to getting ambushed by a few goons. Their simplicity wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing if they weren't such a waste of time otherwise. Oftentimes, they reward you with either a token amount of money or minor skill increases, sometimes nothing at all. Trevor can recycle some of them by taking NPCs to the altruist camp for a higher payout, but you can only do this 4 times. Random events are, for the most part, completely pointless when replaying the game. There's too many of them to cover individually, so I'll just quickly mention the ones that are actually decent and worth doing. 2 events giving access to high quality crewmates, saving the daughter of a mob boss that gives $60,000, looting the aftermath of a gang shootout that gives around 40k, and returning a stolen bike to a rich kid, which gives around 100k worth of stocks. And speaking of stocks, the game has a stock market system that is either completely unreliable to the point of uselessness or game-breakingly broken. There is a large list of in-game companies that the player can invest in, and the prices of their stocks can change throughout the game. It can happen on their own, basically at random, or it can be influenced by certain missions. The Franklin assassination missions are explicitly designed to decrease and increase the value of certain stocks, and this is ripe for abuse, not just for Franklin, but all 3 characters. Other than those, the game recommends buying stocks while their prices are low and selling them after waiting for their prices to go up. This is largely unpredictable and requires constant monitoring of stock prices, and with the game having 3 playable characters, each with their own portfolios, it's just going to be too much of a hassle. When Grand Theft Auto 4 was released, it was not uncommon to see complaints on how the player can no longer mod vehicles, buy property, do odd jobs like driving taxis, or develop the character through trainable skills. Good news, GTA 5 brought those mechanics back. Bad news, all but the first one are completely half-assed. Let's start with property, scattered all throughout the map, aka most of them are stuffed into a southern tip, are various businesses that the player can buy. Now, businesses were introduced in Vice City, and in that game, completing missions associated with them would cost the property to generate daily revenue. All of them took less than 2 in-game weeks to make back the money, not to mention the monetary rewards you receive from the missions themselves. They were a valuable investment and very rewarding to the player. Compare that to 5, where most businesses take over an in-game year to make back the money spent on them, with the golf club in particular taking over 10 years. Even if by some miracle you were to obtain all of them in the first minute of the game, by the time you achieved 100% completion, you wouldn't have even made back 10% of their value. I guess you could just sleep 12 in-game hours away, over and over again, for several real-life hours, but is this really the GTA you wanted to play? Every once in a while, you will also get a call from a random property initiating a property management mission. These range from simple deliveries to repelling gang attacks. Not doing these missions as soon as they appear will cause you to lose out on the weekly revenue, further deflating the property's value. The developers took the complaints about Roman wanting to go bowling at inopportune times to heart, so they removed random friend activities from the game, but still felt the need to bring them back in spirit with the property management stuff. The in-game description for these states that completing them will increase the weekly payout, but I have never seen this, so I can only assume that this is another bug that they never bothered to fix. Not all of them generate the revenue passively though, some require specific tasks to be done. The airfield, for instance, needs you to complete around 25 to 30 gun smuggling operations to earn back the money, while the dock requires you to collect at least 12 barrels of toxic waste in the extremely slow submarine. These are actually the better properties, and despite being monotonous, it will only take a few hours. The impound lot, however, requires you to tow at least 300 cars, and the scrapyard needs 1834 destroyed vehicles. These are the type of numbers I would expect from an MMORPG, not a single-player game. As they are, the properties in GTA 5 are tedious at best and completely meaningless at worst for making money. This really is a feature that was brought back just to placate the players who complain about their absence in GTA 4, with barely any thought put into how they fit within the larger game. The theme of features not being properly thought out continues with the skills. There are 8 different skills the player can develop, and while it is cool how each character starts out with different levels, to better reflect their personalities and backstories, out of those 8 skills, only half of them are worth paying any attention to. Let us cover the good ones first, that are actually worth going out of their way to improve. Shooting then improves firearm handling. You develop this by scoring headshots or using the firing range, so you will very likely max this out as you just play the game. Stamina, that lets you sprint further without losing health. This is improved by either jogging or sprinting, and as with shooting, you'll probably have it maxed by the end. Strength, that grants more damage resistance. You gain strength XP by either fist fighting or doing sports. And special, that lets your character use their overpowered special abilities for longer periods of time. Each character has some variations on how their specials are improved, but for the most part, killing enemies or driving at max speed will improve it. With the exception of strength, you will develop the good skills as you just play the game normally, though it's not a bad idea to speed it along outside of missions, even if the rate at which you gain the XP is very slow and vague. On the other side of the spectrum are the crappy skills. As I already drilled into your head when covering the main story missions, there are very few opportunities to meaningfully utilize stealth. If flying and driving do anything, it is not noticeable. And I don't know who thought lung capacity was a good idea for a skill when there is practically nothing to do underwater and scuba gear exists. Half of the trainable skills, a major returning feature, are completely pointless. You can improve and utilize them, but have no practical reason to, making this another fundamental aspect of gameplay that is ultimately meaningless. The previously mentioned taxi jobs are available, along with other activities, but you're very likely to ignore them after the first time. The payouts for them are terrible, and if you somehow manage to make enough money to buy all the properties in the game using these methods, then I will eat one of my kidneys on camera, and that's a promise. The same is true for most of the activities that reward money. Take the off-road races that you unlock after the first heist. They reward $500 per race, when your characters are already guaranteed to have at least 100k in their bank. This is characteristic to just about all the side activities in the game. They are ultimately a waste of time, unless you value the minor skill increases or the token amount of money they can give. The thing here is that some of them are fun mechanically. I like the hunting minigame, where you have to take into account the direction of the wind, what part of your prey to shoot, and the secondary challenges you are given, but it doesn't change the fact that the rewards for it are almost non-existent. The only side activity that actually might be worth it are bail bonds, where Trevor is tasked with capturing criminals, either alive or dead. Delivering them alive to the overly obese woman will give $10,000 as a reward, as compared to the $5,000 for just killing them. If you want to get the most money, you're going to have to do some planning, as the targets need to be intimidated before they agree to come with you, with each of them being found in different scenarios. Too bad there is only 4 of them in the entire game. Vice City got it right. The many side missions could give a crap load of money and even permanent buffs, like extra health or infinite sprint. There was a legitimate reason to put off the story missions and do these as early as possible to reap the benefits. There are very few, if any, scenarios like that in Grand Theft Auto 5. There are also various collectibles in the game, standard for the series, but I couldn't be bothered to collect them and therefore get the footage for them. Now, before you accuse me of not putting any effort into this, first of all, you are absolutely correct, and second, this attitude reflects the effort Rockstar put into this particular bit of content anyway, so it all balances out in the end. I did, however, collect them all way back on my 360 version, and I can only say one thing: they are a middle finger to your time and dedication. Missions and activities not respecting the player's time is a theme we've discussed already, but the collectibles essentially wipe their asses with the concept, and here's why. Around the waters of San Andreas are 30 submarine parts that await collection by the players who foolishly think this is going to be worth it. The end result of diving into every single one of these locations is $10. I'm dead serious. $10 for something that would take several hours of efficient play to complete. You also get the opportunity to kill the bitch who gave you the task, without any consequences or rewards. Getting the 50 letter scraps will reward you with a chance to kill Peter Dreyfus, a character you probably never even knew existed, unless you stumbled onto an obscure in-game website, Again, without any consequences or rewards. The damn thing happened so abruptly the time I did collect all of them, that the guy ran off before I even realized I could kill him. But what about the 50 spaceship parts? Well, they give you a buggy that makes laser noises when you press the horn. This is probably the best reward out of all the collections, because you actually get something tangible to use. Too bad it's otherwise identical to any other buggy you can find. Remember how the hidden packages in Vice City not only give you money but cost weapons and armor to spawn in your safe houses? Rockstar clearly forgot that with GTA 5. Rarely have I seen a game where collectibles are this useless. And it's really unfortunate too, because this sort of thing would have given you an incentive to explore the intricately detailed open world, which, for the first time in the series, is open to you right from the start. There are no roadblocks that separate the different areas of San Andreas at the beginning of the game, like the police blockades in GTA 4 or the closed bridges in Vice City, but GTA 5 doesn't really do anything with this. Leaving aside the detailed visuals, most of the map is kind of empty when it comes to the aspects of gameplay. The missions and side activities are mainly confined to the southern and central parts of the map, leaving the rest as something you just pass by at best, rather than explore or interact with. Yes, there are weapon pickups hidden in areas that you wouldn't normally go to, but weapons and ammo aren't a problem when they're dirt cheap anyway. Here's a game that does the concept of the map being wide open from the start well, Far Cry 5. You can go tackle one of the 3 big story arcs, or do the missions that unlock companions and unique vehicles first, so that you get to use them throughout the game. The entire map is used, and you also start smack dab in the middle of it, meaning that no location is too far from you. I think this is the 3rd time I've used generic Ubisoft open world slop as examples with the implication that they're better than GTA 5. Or if you're tired of that, take New Vegas, that also has its map open from the start. While there are some soft barriers around the starting town, like the death glass and cazadors preventing you from entering the namesake city, those can be circumvented with knowledge of the game mechanics that you picked up on previous playthroughs. You can use the guaranteed stealth boy at the Goodsprings schoolhouse to sneak through, or lure the monsters into landmines to cripple them, and you really can go anywhere at level 1. The knowledge and experience from one playthrough carries over to the next in New Vegas, and it makes replays all the more satisfying, but this is not the case in Grand Theft Auto 5. Other than the driving, shooting, and evading the police, the game doesn't build a skill set. As we mentioned before, features are introduced just to be discarded later. And there is a reason to explore New Vegas. There are unique weapons, significant quantities of currency, skill books, companions, things that can dictate the course of your entire playthrough depending on when you find them and how you use them. The game justifies its open world setting by rewarding exploration and learning the lay of the land, while GTA 5 doesn't. And this is a major issue with Grand Theft Auto 5. The open world is kinda pointless, and anything you can do with it, there are games that do it better. You want a game that doesn't put arbitrary restrictions on the sandbox, play the yearly Ubisoft fast food games. Want something that rewards exploration, play Skyrim or the Fallout games. If you just want to cause mayhem, play the Just Cause games. When compared to those games, the only thing Grand Theft Auto 5 really has going for in the open world department is the incredibly detailed world. A world that doesn't reward interaction or exploration and actively mocks you for it. GTA 5 has plannable heists, and 3 characters that had the potential to increase replay value, but those aren't used nearly as often as they could have been, and if you think about it, don't necessarily even need an open world as a backdrop. As I said in the beginning, if you told me that Grand Theft Auto 5 was your all-time favorite game, I would understand. I would assume you really enjoyed the story and driving around San Andreas. If you told me that this was your favorite open world game though, then I'd assume you only played through the game once, or have never really even played any other open world games. I realize I'm being a little mean here, but I truly cannot comprehend how this game has gotten such stellar reviews when the open world and the sandbox elements are this lacking, or when features such as skills or property management are so half-baked. These kinds of games should be replayable by their very design, and that is something that Grand Theft Auto 5 does not achieve with its mechanics.